I was halfway through my evening tea when my phone started vibrating across the counter. It was my daughter, Melissa. Her voice was frantic. "Mom, it's Dad. He fell. We're at St. Helena Hospital. You need to come now." My chest tightened. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my purse, keys, and drove like I hadn't driven in years. The night air was sharp, the kind that burns your lungs when you breathe too fast. All I could think was, please, not him too. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, Melissa was already outside, waving me in. She looked perfectly fine. No tears, no panic. Just composed. Too composed. "Where's your father?" I asked, breathless. She gave a soft, rehearsed sigh. "Inside. They just need you to sign something first." Sign something? That made no sense, but I followed her anyway. Hospitals have this way of making you feel small. Fluorescent lights, echoing footsteps, the smell of antiseptic. It's the scent of bad news waiting. Inside, a nurse led me to an exam room. "Please have a seat, Mrs. Porter," she said, glancing at Melissa like she already knew her. A doctor came in with a clipboard. "You've had some episodes of confusion lately," I blinked. "Excuse me?" Melissa stepped in quickly, her voice sweet but firm. "She fainted this morning. It's been happening more often. I didn't want to scare her, but she's not been herself." I stared at her. "Melissa, I haven't fainted once." The doctor avoided my eyes. He slid a form across the counter. Temporary medical guardianship. "I just need your daughter to sign so we can proceed safely," he said. My pulse thudded in my ears. I tried to understand what was happening. Melissa smiled at that practiced daughterly smile and reached for the pen. "Hold on," I said, gripping the edge of the counter. "Why is she signing anything for me?" The doctor gave that patronizing tone doctors use when they think they're dealing with the elderly. "It's just in case, Mrs. Porter. Routine paperwork." "Routine for who?" I snapped. Melissa's hand hovered over the form. "Mom, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Something about her tone, calm, controlled, and completely wrong, made my stomach twist. I wasn't sick. I wasn't dizzy. I hadn't fallen. So why was my daughter looking at me like I was losing my mind? A nurse came in to check my vitals. "Your blood pressure's a bit high," she said softly. "No kidding," I muttered. Melissa stood beside me, gently patting my hand as if I were fragile. "It's okay, Mom. You're safe now." I pulled my hand back. "Safe from what?" That's when I noticed her purse on the chair, wide open, and inside the corner of a manila folder labelled property transfer draft. It was only visible for a second before she closed it, but that second was enough. My heart sank to my stomach. She looked at me and smiled again. "You'll thank me later." The doctor excused himself, saying he needed to prepare the room. Melissa stepped outside to take a call. I could hear her voice through the cracked door, calm and professional. "She's here now. It'll be done tonight." I felt my throat tighten. Done? What was going to be done? The nurse came back with a clipboard, a different one. Her badge said H:RN. She hesitated before speaking. "Mrs. Porter," she whispered, leaning closer, "don't sign anything tonight. Not until I talk to you alone, all right?" I nodded slowly, confused and scared, but the seriousness in her eyes made me listen. She lowered her voice further. "If you trust me, just stay put and act tired. I'll come back in a few minutes." I watched her walk out, wondering if I was in a nightmare or a bad TV movie. But this wasn't fiction. It was too quiet, too sterile, too real. I lay back, pretending to rest. Through the small window in the door, I could see Melissa pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. She was smiling, not the kind of smile that says relief, the kind that says victory. My chest ached. Every instinct screamed to get up and leave, but my keys, my purse, my phone, they were all gone. The nurse returned, sliding a small note under the blanket. It read, "Hide. Don't let them see you. Trust me." I didn't know her, but something in her voice, in the way she moved, quiet, precise, told me she'd seen this before. I nodded once, my throat dry. She mouthed the words, "Now." I slipped off the bed, my hospital gown rustling like a warning bell. She cracked the door, gesturing for me to follow her into a dim hallway lined with storage rooms. We ducked into one, the smell of disinfectant thick in the air. She turned off the light. "Stay quiet," she whispered. I heard footsteps outside, Melissa's voice again, sharper now. "Where is she? She was just here." The nurse looked at me and held up one finger to her lips. Then she whispered, "You're not sick, Mrs. Porter. You're being set up." The words hit me harder than anything I'd heard in my life. My own daughter, setting me up. For what? Money? Control? My hands trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered back, "Why are you helping me?" She said quietly, "Because I've seen daughters like yours before." For the first time that night, I believed her. And for the first time, I realized I was in real danger, not from my health, but from my own blood. If you're watching this and you've ever trusted someone so deeply that you didn't see the knife until it was already in your back, leave a comment below. Tell me what woke you up. And if stories like this hit close to home, subscribe. You might need the next one more than you think. Melissa's voice echoed closer, and the nurse reached for the door handle, signaling me to move. The sound of heels stopped right outside, then silence. The nurse pressed her ear against the door, waiting for the footsteps to fade. The hum of the fluorescent light flickered, cutting in and out like the air itself was holding its breath. My palms were slick. Every second in that dark storage room felt like a stolen heartbeat. She finally whispered, "Okay, let's move," quietly. We stepped out into the hallway, her shoes making no sound against the polished floor. Mine squeaked once, and she shot me a quick glance. Not angry, just sharp, the kind of look that said your life depends on silence. She led me through a maze of half-lit corridors and into a small staff room. She shut the door and pulled the blinds down before speaking again. "You can sit," she said. "My name's Harper Cole. I'm a nurse here. You're safe for now." "For now?" I repeated, my voice shaky. "You mind telling me what the hell is going on?" Harper sat across from me, still keeping her voice low. "Mrs. Porter, your daughter is trying to have you declared mentally incompetent. Once that happens, she'll have control over your medical decisions and your finances." My chest tightened. "That's insane." She nodded. "Yes, but it happens more than people think. She brought in paperwork, told the attending doctor you were showing signs of confusion and paranoia. The hospital's supposed to evaluate you tonight." I stared at her. "She told them I was crazy?" Harper looked me dead in the eye. "Not crazy. Unsafe to live alone. It's a legal trick. They call it guardianship. She gains control and you lose everything." I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a bitter exhale. "You sound like you've seen this before." Her lips tightened. "I have. Elder abuse cases. Usually it's the son or daughter. They use medical excuses to take over assets. You'd be surprised how fast it happens." I sank into the chair, the weight of it pressing into my spine. "Why are you helping me?" Harper hesitated. "Because once, my own aunt didn't have anyone to help her. That was enough for me." I believed her. She got up, checking the hallway through the blinds. "Listen carefully. Do not sign any papers. Do not drink or eat anything your daughter gives you. You understand?" I nodded. "I'm not exactly thirsty for betrayal tonight." That almost made her smile. "Good. You've still got your humour. That's a good sign." A knock rattled the door. My body went cold. Harper motioned for me to stay still. Then she cracked the door open just an inch. Melissa's voice slid through like oil. "Excuse me, I'm looking for my mother. Someone said she came this way." Harper didn't flinch. "I haven't seen her. Maybe check the cafeteria." Melissa paused, suspicion laced in her tone. "What's your name?" "Harper," she answered calmly. I could hear Melissa smile in her voice. "Thank you, Harper. I'll find her." When the footsteps disappeared again, Harper shut the door and exhaled. "You need to stay hidden until I talk to someone I trust. There's a doctor here, Dr. Cho. He's on shift in 30 minutes. He'll help." I nodded, gripping the chair. "What do I do until then?" She looked around, thinking. "Stay here. Don't move. If anyone asks, you're a visiting patient waiting for a consult. I'll bring you a hospital badge so it looks official." The room went quiet again after she left. I could still smell the faint tang of bleach. Somewhere down the hall, a heart monitor beeped steadily, too calm for what was happening inside my chest. I tried to make sense of it all, how Melissa's voice had shifted from daughter to predator, how she'd planned every move down to the fake fainting story. That's when I noticed the mirror above the sink across the room. My reflection looked different. Older, sure, but not weak. My hair was a little messy, my eyes puffy, but there was something fierce behind them, something that hadn't been there in years. Maybe Harper was right. I wasn't crazy. I was under attack. The door opened again. I nearly jumped out of the chair, but it was Harper, holding a visitor's badge and a paper cup. "Here," she whispered, "black coffee. From the staff lounge. You're safe to drink it." I took a sip. It was terrible coffee, but it tasted like control. Harper sat down, flipping through a small notepad. Your daughter brought medication with her earlier. She said it was a supplement you've been taking. I nodded. She's been giving me those drops every morning. Said it was ginkgo for memory. Harper scribbled something. She left the bottle at the nurse's desk. I took a photo. I think I know what's in it, but we'll need Dr. Cho to confirm. What do you mean? She met my eyes again. I think she's been dosing you with something to make you seem disoriented. Just enough to fail a cognitive test. I felt my stomach drop. She's drugging me? Maybe not in high doses, but enough to make you doubt yourself. That's how they do it. They make you question your own memory first. The clock ticked. Every second of it felt like another truth landing heavier than the last. Harper got up. When Dr. Cho gets here, we'll run a blood test. Quietly. Once we have results, you'll have proof. Until then, you stay invisible. She handed me a folded hospital gown. If someone asks who you are, you're Mrs. Hale, scheduled for a late consult. Don't over-explain. Just nod. I tried to breathe evenly. Harper, thank you. She looked at me for a long moment before saying softly, Don't thank me yet. Then she was gone again, leaving me alone with the hum of the vent and the sound of my own heartbeat. I sat there, staring at the badge clipped to my gown. Mrs. Hale. A woman hiding from her own daughter in a hospital that now felt more like a trap than a refuge. Through the blinds, I caught a glimpse of Melissa at the end of the hallway, her phone in one hand, her eyes scanning every room. I froze, hoping she wouldn't look this way. Harper's words replayed in my head like a mantra. Don't sign, don't drink, don't trust. But as Melissa turned and started walking closer, that last part, don't trust, suddenly felt harder than the others. Because she was still my daughter. And even knowing what she'd done, a part of me still wanted to believe she loved me. Her shadow moved across the frosted glass, inches from the door handle. I held my breath. The door cracked open, and Harper's hand appeared first, signalling for silence. She slipped inside, her face tense. She's heading to the nurse's station. We've got about 5 minutes, she whispered. Come with me. I followed her down a side hallway until we reached a larger patient room. Curtains divided the space, and she led me behind one of them. Stay quiet. You'll see why, she said, drawing the curtain closed. From the other side of the divider came the sharp sound of heels. Melissa's. She was talking to someone, voice steady, confident. Dr. Cho will sign off soon. Once it's official, I'll handle the paperwork transfer. My heart started pounding again. Harper gave me a small nod, pressing a finger to her lips. Then another voice joined in, a man's. Calm, professional, with that tone lawyers use when they're already 2 steps ahead. I recognized it immediately. Daniel, my son-in-law. He said, make sure she looks compliant. If she fights it, it'll delay the filing. Melissa lowered her voice, but we could still hear her clearly. Don't worry. She trusts me. She always does. I just have to get her signature on the medical consent form. Then we can file for guardianship by the end of the week. I gripped the edge of the hospital bed so tightly my knuckles turned white. Harper scribbled notes on a small pad, her face pale. Melissa kept talking. The accounts are still in her name. Once the guardianship is finalised, I can move everything into a joint account. Daniel, you'll handle the legal part. Just make sure the property transfer goes through quietly. Already in motion, he replied. Title company says we can finalise by Friday. Her memory issues will back it up. Harper leaned close to my ear. You're hearing this, right? They're using medical guardianship as proof you can't manage your finances. I could barely breathe. The curtain between us and them was thin, too thin. One accidental movement, one cough, and we'd be exposed. Daniel's phone buzzed. It's the agent, he said. Wants confirmation the house is still under her name. He's asking if it's vacant. Melissa laughed lightly, like she was discussing something as simple as redecorating. It will be soon. The sound of that laugh made my stomach twist. That was my daughter. The same little girl who used to hide under the blankets during thunderstorms, who used to whisper, "Don't leave me, Mom." Now she was whispering to steal everything I had left. Harper's eyes flicked to mine. "We need proof," she mouthed. I whispered back, barely audible. "You've got your phone?" She nodded, slipping it from her pocket. She hit record and angled it toward the small gap at the curtain's edge. Daniel continued, We'll keep her at the facility for the evaluation until it's done. Once the court order is in, she won't be able to reverse it. Melissa exhaled, satisfied. Good, I just want her safe, you know? It's what she'd want. That word safe landed like a knife. Harper's phone buzzed faintly and she immediately silenced it, eyes wide. Melissa paused mid-sentence. Did you hear that? She asked. Daniel said, Probably the machines. Let's finish this. I held my breath, afraid even the sound of my heartbeat could give us away. They stepped closer to the curtain. Shadows moved across the thin fabric, the outline of Melissa's face passing inches from where I sat. Harper held still, not even blinking. Then, mercifully, Melissa's phone rang again. That's the lawyer, she said. Come on, let's take this outside. The sound of their footsteps faded. Harper waited another full minute before whispering, You okay? I nodded, though my hands were trembling. She's really doing it. My own daughter. Harper folded her notepad. We've got part of it recorded, but we'll need more, enough to make it undeniable. I can't believe she'd do this, I said quietly. Harper's voice softened. People do strange things when money's involved, especially when they think they can get away with it. The curtain fluttered slightly from the air vent. For a moment I just stared at it, this thin, flimsy barrier that had kept the truth hidden for years. Harper said, We need to get you somewhere safe, but first I have to get that bottle of drops she brought. Dr. Cho's almost here. If the lab confirms what I suspect, we'll have solid evidence. Do you think she'll notice I'm gone? She already has, Harper said flatly. But right now she thinks you're wandering around confused. That's the one thing working in our favour. I leaned back against the wall, suddenly exhausted. You're telling me to act like the crazy old lady she wants me to be. Harper gave a small, dry smile. Exactly. Let her believe her own story. It was almost funny, in a dark, bitter way. My daughter wanted me helpless, and now that was exactly how I'd beat her. A knock sounded at the door. Harper motioned me to stay still again, then opened it carefully. Dr. Cho stepped in, holding a folder. He was calm, mid-40s, sharp eyes behind wire glasses. Harper filled me in, he said quietly. Mrs. Porter, I'm sorry you're going through this. I've seen it before. I studied his face. You believe me? He nodded. Let's just say I don't believe your daughter more. He handed Harper a small sample kit. Get a blood draw. We'll rush it to the lab. If those supplements show controlled substances, this whole thing changes. Harper moved efficiently, setting up the supplies. You'll feel a quick sting, she said, steady as a rock. The needle slid in, and I barely noticed the pain. My mind was too busy replaying Melissa's words, her tone so familiar, so cold. Dr. Cho labelled the sample. We'll get this processed within an hour. He turned to Harper. Keep her off the record until I confirm results. When he left, Harper packed the vials into a sealed bag. You did great, she said softly. I laughed, hollow but controlled. All I did was sit behind a curtain and find out my daughter wants to steal my life. Harper looked at me for a long moment. No, she said. You stayed calm. That's the difference between panic and power. Through the small window in the room's door, I could see Melissa again at the nurse's station, flipping through papers, pretending to be worried. She even wiped her eyes for effect. Harper followed my gaze. She's good at pretending, I whispered. So am I. Melissa turned, scanning the hallway again, and I stepped back behind the curtain, this time by choice. The blood draw left a small bruise on my arm, nothing compared to the bruise already forming somewhere deeper. Harper sealed the samples, tucked them into her bag, and slipped out to deliver them to Dr. Cho. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes before you realise just how deep the trouble goes. From behind the curtain, I could see the hallway again. Melissa stood at the nurse's station, phone to her ear, smiling politely as she spun her story. Yes, she's been confused for weeks, she told whoever was on the other end. I think she's starting to forget people. She laughed lightly. It's sad, really, but I'll take care of her. I wanted to walk right out there and tell everyone she was lying, that my mind was sharp as ever, but Harper's warning echoed in my head. Let her think she's in control. So I stayed behind the curtain, playing the part she'd cast me in. A few minutes later, Harper returned with Dr. Cho. He shut the door behind him and spoke quietly. We sent the sample to the lab, he said, but I also took a closer look at those drops your daughter brought. He held up a small bottle, clear liquid inside. Ginkgo, that's true, but it's mixed with warfarin and low-dose antihistamines. That combination can cause dizziness, confusion, even fainting if taken regularly. I stared at the bottle. She's been giving that to me for months, said it was good for circulation. It would explain your symptoms, Harper said. She wasn't trying to make you sick, just unstable enough for the paperwork to make sense. Dr. Cho placed the bottle into an evidence bag. This is textbook manipulation. Medical guardianship fraud happens when family members fake symptoms to get legal control. I've seen it before. I shook my head slowly. You mean she's been setting me up this whole time? Pretending to help me, feeding me poison? Harper corrected gently. Not poison, just enough to make you doubt yourself. It's psychological as much as physical. A hollow laugh escaped me. Well, she succeeded. I've spent weeks wondering if I was losing it. Dr. Cho's voice softened. You didn't imagine it, and now we can prove it. Harper packed the evidence bag into her tote. We'll keep this between us for now. APS will need a report once we have the lab confirmation. I nodded, my throat tight. APS, Adult Protective Services? Yes, Harper said. They investigate elder financial and medical abuse, but they need a solid case, not just suspicion. That's what we're building. A wave of nausea hit me, the kind that comes not from illness, but realization. She planned this with Daniel. He's a lawyer. He'd know exactly how to do it. Dr. Cho exchanged a look with Harper. That complicates things. They'll know how to cover their tracks, but the more we stay quiet, the more they'll expose themselves. The nurse leaned closer. So we let them think they're winning. I managed a thin smile. Now you're talking my language. Dr. Cho left to prepare the paperwork for the lab, and Harper stayed behind, tidying up like everything was normal. I'm going to move you to another room, she said. Less visible. It's safer. Safer from my daughter, I muttered, shaking my head. What a thing to say out loud. She didn't respond. She just gave me a badge labelled patient evaluation, observation only, and walked me to a small private room tucked at the end of the hall. The window looked out onto the parking lot. My car was still there, but Melissa had my keys. The air felt heavy, thick with hospital detergent and betrayal. Harper helped me onto the bed and adjusted the blanket. Try to rest, she said quietly. You'll need your energy later. Rest? As if anyone could sleep through this. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them like maybe I could measure the distance between the mother I used to be and the woman sitting in a hospital room under a fake name. The door opened again, and Harper leaned in, her voice low. Your daughter just spoke to administration. She's pushing to move you to the memory ward for overnight evaluation. I turned to her sharply. What does that mean? It means she's trying to isolate you. Once you're admitted there, she can file for emergency guardianship within 24 hours. We can't let that happen. I sat up, the blanket falling away. Then we don't. Harper smiled faintly, impressed. I like your attitude. She slipped a folder onto the bedside table. Inside are copies of every document she's tried to file so far. I pulled them from the system. It's risky, but worth it. I opened the folder. My name was on every page. Power of attorney, consent for treatment, property transfer. My signature was forged at the bottom of half of them. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. She didn't even try to make it look real. She didn't have to, Harper said. She figured no one would question a caring daughter. I closed the folder and met her eyes. Then we questioned everything. A sudden knock on the door made both of us freeze. Harper straightened immediately, adjusting her badge. It's her, she whispered. Melissa walked in, all soft smiles and concern. Mom, there you are. You had me worried sick. She turned to Harper. Thank you for watching her. She gets a little confused sometimes. Harper returned the smile, polite but cold. She's been resting. Melissa turned back to me. You should have told me you were feeling worse. The doctor says it's best you stay overnight. They'll keep you in observation. I already signed for it. I forced my lips into a small smile. That's thoughtful of you. She seemed relieved. I just want what's best for you. I know, I said evenly. That's what worries me. Her smile faltered for a second, but she recovered fast. I'll bring your things from home tomorrow. You just focus on resting, okay? Sure, I said. Resting sounds nice. When she left, Harper closed the door and exhaled. You handled that like a pro. I leaned back, exhaustion flooding through me. If I play the fool long enough, maybe she'll forget I'm watching. Harper smirked. Let's hope she's that arrogant. Outside, Melissa's voice floated down the hallway again, cheerful as ever. Yes, she's stable now. Thank you, Doctor. I'll handle everything else. Harper glanced toward the sound, her jaw tightening. She's not handling anything anymore. I adjusted the blanket and stared at the ceiling again, the fluorescent light flickering like a heartbeat I no longer trusted. The hospital felt less like a place of healing and more like a stage, and my daughter had just taken centre spotlight in a play she didn't know I'd started to rewrite. The next morning, sunlight cut through the blinds in thin, sterile lines. I hadn't slept. My body was in the bed, but my mind hadn't stopped running all night. Every sound in the hallway, every rolling cart, every distant page, sounded like Melissa's footsteps coming closer. Harper came in with a cup of coffee and a clipboard. "The lab called," she said quietly. "Preliminary results show traces of warfarin in your system. Dr. Cho's making the report official." "So it's real," I said flatly. "It's real," she confirmed. "Now we just need to let her hang herself with her own lies." I almost smiled. That shouldn't take long. Harper left to speak with the doctor, and I stayed still, staring at the muted television in the corner. Morning news anchors smiled like nothing bad ever happened in the world. The door opened again. Melissa walked in, hair perfect, makeup natural enough to look effortless. She carried a bouquet of lilies, his favourite flowers, not mine. She was always performing, even in the small things. "Good morning, Mom," she said softly, her voice dripping warmth. "How are you feeling today?" "Like I could run a marathon," I said deadpan. She laughed as if I'd made a joke. "You always were stubborn. I talked to Dr. Cho this morning. He said you need a few more days of rest. Don't fight it." I tilted my head. "You spoke to Dr. Cho? That's funny. I didn't think he was working with family." She blinked, caught for half a second, then smiled again. "Well, you know me. I like to be involved." "Yes," I said. "You always did." She put the flowers on the table, straightened them twice, and then sat beside me. "Mom," she began carefully, "I've been thinking a lot about what's best for you. The house is too much. It's old, it needs work. You'd be so much happier in a place with support, people who can help you. Like a nursing home?" I asked. She softened her voice. "It's not like that. It's an assisted community. They have activities, friends, a nurse on call." "You mean control?" I said quietly. "They have control." Her expression didn't break, but her tone sharpened just slightly. "Mom, this isn't about control. You're not managing as well as you think. I've seen it." I looked her straight in the eye. "You've seen what you wanted to see." She sighed, like she was the one exhausted by all this. "Please, don't make me the bad guy here." "You don't have to try that hard," I said. "You're doing fine on your own." Her mouth twitched, but she didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she pulled a folder from her purse and placed it on the tray table. "These are some papers from the facility. Just read them when you feel up to it. I've already toured it. It's beautiful." I didn't touch the folder. "Did Daniel tour it too?" Her eyes flickered. "He's helping with the details, yes, because nothing says loving daughter like a lawyer with a real estate background." Melissa leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Mom, I know you're upset, but you need to trust me. This is for your safety." I smiled, small and sharp. "You keep saying that word, and it keeps sounding like something else." Before she could answer, Harper walked in with perfect timing. "Oh, good morning," she said brightly. "Mrs. Porter, how are we feeling?" "Sharp as a tack," I said. Harper turned to Melissa. "Could I borrow you for a minute? We need to verify some contact details for the hospital record." Melissa nodded and followed her into the hallway. Through the door, I could hear Harper's voice, polite but firm. "We have your emergency contact as Daniel Reed. Can you confirm?" "Yes," Melissa said. "And you're listed as the primary caregiver?" "Yes, I am." "Perfect," Harper replied sweetly. "Just so we're clear, any financial documentation you've submitted on her behalf will be reviewed before processing." There was a pause. Then Melissa's tone changed. "Excuse me?" Harper answered with the same calm professionalism. "Routine audit. The hospital's had issues with fraudulent guardianship filings. Nothing to worry about if everything's legitimate." I couldn't see Melissa's face, but I could picture it, the flash of anger under a mask of composure. She'd been caught off guard, something she hated more than anything. When she came back in, her smile looked slightly tighter. Everything's fine, she said quickly, grabbing her purse. I'll be back later. Take your time, I said. I'm not going anywhere. After she left, Harper reappeared. She didn't like that, she said with a small grin. Good, I said. She's been too comfortable. Harper sat at the foot of the bed, her tone softening. You're handling this better than most people would. I've had practice, I said. Melissa's always been a performer. She learned early how to make people believe her version of things. I just never thought she'd turn it on me. She's not as clever as she thinks, Harper said. People like that always leave a trail. Words, signatures, dates. They think charm hides it. I looked toward the bouquet on the table. Charm fades fast when the truth starts showing. Harper chuckled under her breath. You've got more fight in you than half my patients. Not a patient, I corrected gently, just a mother who picked the wrong person to trust. Outside, Melissa's voice echoed faintly as she spoke with someone near the elevators. Even without hearing the words, I could tell she was spinning another version of the story. One where she was the hero, the devoted daughter trying to protect her poor, confused mother. I lay back against the pillow, feeling the weight of it all settle somewhere deep but not heavy. I wasn't the victim in her story anymore. I was rewriting it, quietly, methodically, with every breath I took without permission. Harper came back with a file tucked under her arm. Dr. Cho just sent the full report to the administration. It's official. Those supplements were causing your symptoms. You're being cleared for discharge. Cleared? I repeated. Within a few hours. Once you're out, we'll hand everything to APS. A strange mix of relief and dread washed over me. She won't see it coming, I said. No, Harper replied, but you'll need to act like you're still blind to it. That's how we finish this cleanly. I nodded. Then I'll give her the performance she's been waiting for. Harper's lips curved in approval. Now that is poetic justice. The lilies on the table caught a stray beam of sunlight. I watched them sway slightly in the draft from the air vent, perfect, polished, and temporary, just like Melissa's version of love. When the discharge papers came through that afternoon, Harper walked in holding a thin manila envelope. Her tone was steady, but her eyes told me we were moving into dangerous territory. You're officially clear to leave the hospital, she said, handing me the envelope. Dr. Cho already sent the medical report to APS. But before you walk out of here, there's something you should see. She placed a second folder on the tray table and opened it. Inside were copies of hospital documents, financial requests, and digital forms, all with my signature scrawled across them, except they weren't mine. The first page read, Medical Consent Authorization, Melissa Reed, Legal Guardian. The second, Financial Transfer Request, Joint Account. The third, Residential Placement Approval, Rosehaven Care Facility. Every signature was neat, almost practiced, like someone who'd spent time studying my handwriting. Harper tapped her finger on the corner of the page. We pulled these from the system. Your daughter uploaded them yesterday under your name, time-stamped and logged. She forged all this? I said quietly. Harper nodded. And if you hadn't been here when she filed it, she might have gotten away with it. The weight of it hit me like a slow punch. For a moment, I couldn't even feel angry. Just hollow. She really thought she could sign me out of my own life, I said finally. She still does, Harper said. Which is why we're not telling her you're leaving today. I exhaled slowly. You're good at this. I've had practice, she replied, and for the first time her tone hinted at something personal. Before I could ask, her phone buzzed. She answered quietly, listened, then hung up. That was Dr. Cho. Lab confirmed the mixture in those drops. They contain small doses of diphenhydramine. Over time, enough to cause cognitive impairment. That's your smoking gun. Then it's over? I asked. Not yet, she said. APS needs the official report before they can step in. Until then, we need to let her think she's still in control. That means you'll have to go home with her today. I blinked. You're kidding. Trust me, Harper said. The safest place for you right now is under her watch, because she'll never suspect that you know. That logic made a twisted kind of sense. So I pretend to be the confused old woman again. Exactly, she said. And we'll keep collecting evidence while she thinks she's winning. A knock interrupted us. The door opened, and Melissa walked in, all cheerful energy and fake concern. Mom, you're getting discharged? That's wonderful. She turned to Harper. "Thank you for taking such good care of her. I'll handle everything from here." Harper smiled politely. "Of course. Just sign the release papers and she's all yours." Melissa looked through the paperwork like she'd already memorized it. "Perfect," she said, signing quickly. "Come on, Mom. Let's get you home. I've already called Daniel. He's got dinner ready." I managed a small nod. "Lovely." She wrapped her arm around mine as we walked down the hall. Her touch looked affectionate to anyone watching, but I could feel the pressure in her fingers, guiding, controlling, almost claiming. We passed Dr. Cho in the hallway. He stopped to shake Melissa's hand. "Mrs. Reed, thank you for being such a devoted daughter. We'll be in touch about your mother's follow-up." Melissa smiled brightly. "Of course, Doctor. Anything for her health?" He looked at me then, just long enough for me to catch the smallest nod. That was the signal. I wasn't alone in this. Outside, the cool air hit my face like a jolt. For the first time in days, I could breathe freely. But freedom felt strange when you had to fake it. Melissa unlocked her car and guided me inside. The ride home was quiet. She played soft instrumental music, the kind meant to calm nerves. The irony wasn't lost on me. When we reached the house, Daniel was waiting in the doorway. "Welcome home, Mom," he said smoothly, stepping aside. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, except cleaner. Too clean. The family photos were gone from the shelves. The boxes near the entryway were labelled storage. Melissa noticed my stare. "I just thought we'd declutter a bit," she said. "Make the place easier to manage." "Manage," I repeated softly. "Right." She smiled, missing the edge in my voice. "You'll thank me later." I walked past her and into the living room. The TV was on mute, showing a commercial for a retirement community. The irony stung again. Daniel followed me, speaking like a salesman who thought I might sign something any minute. "You know, Rosehaven's actually a great place, Mrs. Porter. My firm's handled a few of their contracts. Top-tier facility." "I'm sure it is," I said. "Shame I won't be needing it." Melissa gave him a quick look, the kind that said, "Stop talking." Then she turned back to me with another careful smile. "Let's just focus on getting you settled tonight." I sat down on the couch, forcing calm. "You're very organised. Melissa, always have been." She lit up at the compliment. "Someone has to be, right?" "That's true," I said. "It's just interesting how you've managed to organise my entire life without asking." Her smile froze, then returned as if glued back in place. "You're tired," she said gently. "Let's talk about this tomorrow." "Sure," I said, leaning back. "Tomorrow sounds good." Daniel headed to the kitchen, pretending to check his phone. Melissa began rearranging papers on the coffee table. Insurance forms, bank statements, even a spare copy of my will. All perfectly stacked, all conveniently ready. I let her think I wasn't paying attention, but every detail burned into my memory. When Harper's number appeared on my phone later that night, I slipped into the guest bathroom and whispered, "I'm home. Everything looks staged." She replied quietly, "Good. That means they're confident. The camera should pick up what we need." "What camera?" I asked. "I had Dr. Cho's assistant leave a small one inside your bag," Harper said. "It's recording audio for the next 24 hours. Don't mention it. Just act normal." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was calm, almost too calm. I wasn't acting anymore. I was adapting. Melissa called from the living room. "Mom, you okay in there?" "Just fine," I said, forcing a pleasant tone. "I'm exactly where I need to be." I stepped out, smiling the same way she did, and sat down beside her on the couch. She thought she was directing the play. She had no idea I'd already started rewriting the script. Melissa had always loved control. As a kid, she colour-coded her crayons and rewrote her Christmas lists 3 times before showing them to me. Now she organised people the same way, one signature at a time. That night, she and Daniel acted like a loving couple who'd just saved a confused parent from her own mistakes. They made dinner, pasta, salad, a glass of white wine I didn't touch. Melissa watched me like a hawk the entire meal, waiting for me to stumble, to mix up words, to confirm her story. I didn't give her the satisfaction. She tried small talk. "Remember when you taught me to bake pies, Mom?" "I do," I said evenly. "You cried because you burned the crust." Daniel chuckled. "Guess she got that from you." "Guess so," I said, smiling thinly. Every line felt rehearsed, like they were performing for an invisible audience, the audience they thought would believe them when this was all over. After dinner, Melissa cleaned up while Daniel checked emails. I excused myself to the living room, where my old photo albums stacked on the coffee table. She must have put them there for effect. The nostalgic props of a sentimental mother. The small camera Harper had hidden inside my purse was still recording. I made sure it was angled toward the kitchen, catching their voices. Melissa's tone shifted once she thought I couldn't hear. "She's playing along too well," she whispered. "You think she suspects something?" Daniel replied quietly, "Doesn't matter. Once the court papers go through, it won't make a difference." My stomach turned. I wanted to storm in, to shout that I'd heard every word, but I forced myself still. Harper was right. Patience was the weapon now. Melissa walked back in with her usual brightness. "Mom, you should rest. I can set up the guest room upstairs." "I'm fine down here," I said. "Old knees don't like stairs much." She hesitated, then smiled. "Whatever makes you comfortable." When she left the room, I reached for my phone. A new text from Harper flashed on the screen. "APS received the evidence. Stay calm tonight. Cho confirms results. We move tomorrow." The message hit like a slow breath of relief, but I couldn't show it. "Not yet." Melissa came back, holding a small bottle of water. "Here," she said sweetly. "Don't forget to take your drops before bed." I looked at the bottle on the counter, identical to the one Dr. Cho had bagged earlier. "You sure that's safe to mix with wine?" I asked, watching her reaction. She blinked, then laughed. "Mom, they're vitamins, not sleeping pills." "I'm old, not gullible," I said. Her smile tightened, but she said nothing. She placed the bottle on the counter and went upstairs. As soon as she was gone, I poured the entire thing into the sink. The liquid swirled down the drain, clear, harmless-looking, deceit in liquid form. I stood there a while, staring at the empty sink, the kind of silence that hums louder than any noise. Daniel's footsteps creaked overhead. Melissa's voice drifted through the vent. "She's still too sharp. Maybe we should move faster." He replied, "We can't. If we push it, APS will flag it." "Then she needs another episode," she said. Something convincing. My pulse quickened. I backed away from the counter, every instinct screaming. Harper's warning came back clear. Don't eat, don't drink, don't trust. I turned off the kitchen light, letting the darkness cover me. If they wanted a performance, I could play my part better than either of them. The next morning, Melissa acted as if nothing had happened. She made breakfast, eggs, toast, orange juice, and chatted about the weather. Daniel left for his office early, or at least he said he did. I sat at the table, nodding along, letting her think she'd regained control. "You're quiet today," she said after a while. "Just tired," I answered. "Too much excitement lately." She smiled sympathetically. "It's okay. Soon you won't have to worry about anything anymore." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. She meant it kindly, but it sounded like a threat. After she left to run errands, I finally had the house to myself. The morning light filtered through the windows, landing on the paperwork she'd left open on the counter, her neatly arranged trail of lies. I began going through the stack. Bank statements, insurance forms, and one particular document that made my skin crawl. A notarized letter requesting temporary transfer of funds for assisted care expenses. My name was forged at the bottom again. I slipped it all into a folder, tucked it under the couch cushion, and sat back down, my pulse steady but fierce. By mid-afternoon, Melissa returned cheerful as ever. "Mom, good news," she said. "I spoke to a specialist who can evaluate your memory at home. Isn't that convenient?" "Very," I said. "You always make things so easy." She smiled, missing the edge again. "That's what daughters are for." She poured herself coffee and scrolled through her phone, humming along to some pop song like she wasn't planning a financial takeover. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. I studied her face, so confident, so certain she'd already won. That was her weakness. The phone rang. She picked it up, putting on her sweet professional voice. "Yes, this is Melissa Reed. Yes, she's stable now. We're ready to proceed once the paperwork clears." My hands tightened around my coffee mug. She paused to listen, then said, "Perfect. Thank you." When she hung up, I asked, "Everything all right?" She smiled. "Just confirming your evaluation for tomorrow. Dr. Henson's very experienced with cognitive patients." "Cognitive patients," I wanted to laugh. "You think I'm crazy?" I asked lightly. She hesitated, unsure if it was a trap. "Of course not, Mom, but it's better to have professionals involved. For your protection." I leaned back. Of course, my protection. She busied herself tidying the kitchen again. I sat still, staring at her reflection in the glass cabinet door. Her movements were calm, methodical, efficient, the same way she used to organize her toys before accusing her brother of losing one. Some patterns never die, they just evolve. That night I stayed awake again, listening to the quiet creak of the old house, the ticking clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of Melissa pacing upstairs. Every minute felt stretched thin, like the pause before a storm breaks. In the dark, I could almost hear Harper's voice again, calm and certain. The waiting is the hardest part, but silence makes people show themselves. And Melissa was already starting to. By the time the so-called specialist arrived the next morning, I was ready. I'd spent the night rehearsing calm, polite small talk, the kind that looks harmless but gives nothing away. Melissa stood near the door, smiling too wide, her voice soft and sugary. "Mom, this is Dr. Henson," she said. "He's just here to do a quick memory evaluation." The man was in his 50s, polite but detached. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and carried a clipboard thick with forms. "Good morning, Mrs. Porter," he said warmly. "This won't take long." I gave him my best sweet grandma smile. "Oh, that's fine, dear. I've got nowhere to be, apparently." Melissa laughed too loudly. "She still has her sense of humour," she said. He nodded and started asking questions. My name, my address, the year, the president. Easy. Then he slipped in trickier ones. What day it was, what I'd eaten for breakfast, what colour his tie was. I answered all of them. Perfectly. He looked up, surprised. "Excellent recall," he said. "Most patients your age miss a few." Melissa leaned forward. "Are you sure, doctor? She's been having moments of confusion lately," I smiled. "Only when I'm listening to her, apparently." "Doctor," Henson gave me a curious look but kept going. When he asked me to remember 3 words, apple, penny, table, and repeat them 5 minutes later, I did it without hesitation. By the end of the test, his polite detachment had shifted to visible curiosity. "Honestly," he said, "I see no sign of cognitive impairment." Melissa's smile faltered for the first time. "That's odd," she said quickly. "Maybe it comes and goes. She's been different lately." He wrote something down. "Could be stress-related, but from what I see, she's quite lucid." "Lucid," I repeated, savouring the word. "I like that one." Melissa's face tightened. "Are you sure you don't want to run further tests?" He looked mildly uncomfortable. "I can, but I don't see a reason to. Unless there's documented evidence of mental decline, I'd consider her fully competent." I could almost hear her teeth grinding. "Thank you, doctor," she said through her fake smile. "We appreciate your time." When he left, she stood there silently, gripping the edge of the counter. "I don't understand this," she muttered. "You were confused just last week." "Confused?" I echoed. "You mean the week after you started giving me those vitamins?" Her head snapped up. "What?" "The drops," I said simply. "The ones you said would help my memory." For the briefest second, panic flashed in her eyes, then she smoothed it over with a brittle laugh. "Oh, Mom, come on! Don't start imagining things. They were supplements." "Of course," I said calmly. "Supplements that made me forget what day it was." She crossed her arms. "You're being paranoid." "That's funny," I said. "Paranoid is exactly what a guilty person calls someone who's finally paying attention." She looked like she wanted to say more, but her phone buzzed. "Excuse me," she said, stepping away. I watched her retreat into the hallway, whispering furiously into the phone. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught pieces. "No, the doctor didn't." "No, she's fine. I'll handle it." That's when my phone buzzed too. A text from Harper. "Lab results confirmed. APS dispatching investigator today. Keep calm." Recording worked. The small camera she'd planned my purse had caught everything. Melissa's fake concern, Daniel's admissions, even the call where they discussed the guardianship papers. My hand steadied. The proof existed now, not just in whispers or suspicions, but in hard evidence. Melissa returned, her voice smoother than before. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you." She sat down across from me, clasping my hands. "You know I only want what's best for you, right?" "Always," I said, looking straight into her eyes. "You've made that very clear." She gave me that soft, almost tearful look she used to get when she was caught lying as a teenager. "You don't trust me anymore, do you?" I leaned back. "Trust is like savings, honey. Once you spend it all, it's gone." She laughed nervously. "You really think I'd hurt you?" "I don't think. I said evenly. I know, the front doorbell rang. Melissa froze. Who is that? I shrugged. Probably Harper. She said she'd bring my follow-up paperwork. Her expression hardened instantly. Harper who? Before I could answer, the nurse's calm voice floated from the hallway. Morning, Mrs. Porter. I hope I'm not interrupting. Melissa turned on her with a tight smile. You don't have authorization to be here. Harper held up a form. Actually, I do. APS requested I deliver this report directly to Mrs. Porter. Melissa's eyes flicked toward the paper. APS? She repeated, her voice suddenly smaller. Harper nodded. Adult Protective Services. We've been reviewing some irregularities. For a split second, the house went silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pause. Then Melissa forced a laugh. Oh, that's ridiculous. Someone must have made a mistake. Harper smiled, polite but sharp. Maybe, but we like to double-check mistakes before they cost people their homes. Melissa's hand tightened around her phone. You can't just come in here. Oh, I can, Harper said smoothly. And I did. We'll need a few statements before we proceed further. Melissa turned to me, fury barely contained. Did you call them? I looked at her calmly. No, they called me. Her face went pale, then red, then something in between. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed. I think I'm awake, I said. Harper pulled out a small recorder. For transparency, she said, I'd like to ask a few questions. Melissa's composure cracked. You have no right. I have every right, Harper said firmly, especially when there's proof of substance manipulation and forged medical documents. The audio we collected confirms both. The colour drained completely from Melissa's face. She looked at me with something between anger and disbelief. You were recording me? No, I said, standing up. You recorded yourself. For a moment, she looked ready to explode, but instead she turned and walked toward the door, muttering, I need to call my husband. Harper watched her leave, then turned to me. That went better than I expected. I managed a slow exhale. You think that's over? Not yet, Harper said, but the truth's out, and once it's out, it doesn't go back in. I sat down, feeling the air shift around me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel afraid. Outside, I could see Melissa pacing near the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, her expression unravelling piece by piece. Harper glanced toward her, then looked back at me. Ready for the rest? I nodded once. Let's finish what she started. Melissa's voice carried through the open doorway, sharp and frantic. You don't understand. She's confused. She's being manipulated by that nurse. Harper didn't flinch. She stood in the middle of the living room, clipboard in hand, her tone calm and professional. Mrs. Reed, we have verified medical reports and recordings that show otherwise. Dr. Cho has confirmed your mother's cognitive health is intact, and the lab results prove she was given substances without consent. Melissa's face twisted. That's not true! Those were vitamins! Vitamins don't come with a Schedule 4 classification, Harper said quietly. The words hit like a slap. Melissa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. From the doorway, I could see a police cruiser pulling up to the curb, lights flashing blue against the window pane. A second car followed, marked with the APS logo. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from something that looked like relief wearing the mask of dread. Melissa turned toward me. You called the cops on your own daughter? I met her eyes, steady. No, I called the truth. Her lips trembled, but the rage in her eyes burned hotter than any tears could. You think you're the victim here? Don't think, I said. I know. Harper stepped aside as the two officers entered the room, followed by a man in a grey blazer who introduced himself as Detective Aaron Kent from the Elder Protection Unit. We're here following an APS report regarding suspected medical and financial abuse. Melissa straightened, trying to gather herself. This is insane. My mother's not well. She doesn't understand what's happening. Harper handed the detective a flash drive. This contains video and audio evidence collected at St. Helena Hospital and this residence. It includes conversations between Mrs. Reed and her husband discussing guardianship, asset transfer, and chemical impairment. The detective took it, glancing at Melissa. Ma'am, we'll need you to stay here while we review this. Daniel burst through the door, jacket half-buttoned, face flushed. What the hell is going on here? Melissa pointed at Harper. She's framing us. She's making it look like we're criminals. Harper didn't even turn. I don't need to make it look like anything. The facts do that on their own. Daniel looked from me to the officers, calculating fast. This is a misunderstanding. My wife was only acting in her mother's best interest. You know how fragile seniors can be. I almost laughed. You'd know all about fragility, Daniel. You've built a whole career exploiting it. He glared at me, but before he could respond, Detective Kent spoke. Mr. Reed, we've reviewed partial transcripts already. You were recorded advising your wife to secure a guardianship within 48 hours. You also mentioned finalizing a title transfer for her property. Daniel's face lost all its colour. That recording's taken out of context. Harper crossed her arms. Context doesn't change intent. The room went still except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Melissa's breathing came fast and shallow. You can't arrest us for helping my own mother. The detective nodded once to the officers. You're right, but we can arrest you for attempting to defraud and medically manipulate her. Mrs. Reed, you're under investigation for attempted elder financial abuse. Mr. Reed for conspiracy. Melissa gasped. You can't do this. Daniel's voice cracked. You don't have evidence. Harper pointed to the envelope on the table. We have her forged signatures, the lab results and the audio. That's more than enough. The officers moved forward. Melissa backed away until she hit the wall. Mom, please, tell them this is a mistake. I looked at her, really looked at her. For all the lies, for all the cruelty, she was still my child. But that didn't make her innocent. This isn't a mistake, I said quietly. It's a choice. You made it. Her expression wavered, and for a moment I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who clung to my leg on her first day of school, terrified to let go. Then the officers took her wrists, and that image shattered. Daniel didn't resist. He just stared at the floor, muttering something about calling his attorney. When they led them both outside, Harper rested a hand on my shoulder. You did the hardest part, she said softly. I didn't do anything, I whispered. I just stopped pretending not to see. The room felt enormous once they were gone. Too quiet, too clean, stripped of their noise. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling now that there was no need to keep them still. Detective Kent lingered a moment longer. Mrs. Porter, you should know this isn't uncommon. Most cases like this never reach justice. You were lucky to have someone like Nurse Cole. I nodded. Luck had nothing to do with it. She cared when it was easier not to. Harper smiled faintly. That's not luck, Mrs. Porter. That's character. He handed her a card. We'll keep you updated. APS will also assist with any financial recovery and legal protection moving forward. When the door finally closed behind them, the house felt both safer and lonelier than it ever had. The light from the window stretched across the floor, falling on the scattered papers Melissa had left behind. One of them, the guardianship form, still bore her neat forged version of my signature. I picked it up, folded it once, and slipped it into my pocket. Evidence, I said quietly, though maybe I was saying it to myself. Harper gathered her things, looking around. You're free now, she said. Free, I repeated. The word felt strange in my mouth. Unfamiliar, but right. She smiled. You'll get used to it. We stood there for a moment, both silent, both knowing this wasn't the end. It was the breath that comes after the storm, the pause before you start living again. Outside, the cruiser doors slammed shut. Through the window, I saw Melissa turn her head, her eyes meeting mine one last time. There wasn't hate there anymore, just shock, maybe even shame. I didn't wave, I didn't cry. I just stood there, breathing in the stillness that she'd tried so hard to steal. Harper glanced at me. You want me to stay a bit? No, I said. Go home. You've done enough. She nodded, gave me one last look, then walked out. When the engine sounds faded and the house fell back into silence, I finally sat down on the couch. My body shook, but not from fear, it was release. I looked toward the window again, watching the last flash of blue fade down the street, and whispered, Justice walks quieter than people think. The courtroom felt colder than any hospital I'd ever been in. The walls were beige, the air dry, and the sound of papers shuffling seemed louder than it should. I sat quietly at the plaintiff's table beside Harper and the APS attorney, hands folded in my lap, while Melissa and Daniel whispered to each other across the aisle. She looked smaller without her confidence, like a person wearing clothes a size too big. Daniel's tie was crooked, his knuckles white against the edge of the table. The judge entered, a tall man with sharp glasses and the patience of someone who's seen every kind of lie. Court is now in session for the state of Oregon versus Melissa Reed and Daniel Reed, he said, his voice cutting through the room. When he asked Melissa to stand, she hesitated. Her voice, once steady and commanding, trembled. Your Honor, I only wanted to protect my mother. She's been confused lately, and I was trying to make sure her finances were handled responsibly. The prosecutor rose immediately. Your Honor, the evidence shows otherwise. Mrs. Porter's cognitive evaluation was normal. The defendant's communications include plans to secure financial guardianship and transfer her property for personal use. He clicked the remote. The monitor behind him lit up. Audio from the recordings Harper had gathered. Melissa's voice filled the courtroom. Open quote. If we get the guardianship, she can't undo it. We'll just tell the bank she's showing signs of dementia. Then Daniel's voice. I'll handle the paperwork. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. Close quote. Melissa's face drained of colour. She stared at the floor, unable to look at anyone. The prosecutor continued. We also have verified lab results from Dr. Samuel Cho indicating diphenhydramine was administered in doses sufficient to impair memory and concentration. This was presented as vitamin drops and given without consent. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Reed, did you or did you not administer those drops to your mother? Melissa's eyes filled, but she didn't answer. Daniel spoke instead. She didn't know what she was doing. It was my idea. She thought it would calm her mother's nerves. Mr. Reed, the judge interrupted, that excuse implies you knowingly facilitated a deception. The silence that followed was heavy, final, the kind that separates guilt from denial. The prosecutor nodded. Precisely, Your Honour. Both defendants acted in coordination to exploit Mrs. Porter, meeting the criteria for attempted elder financial abuse and fraud. I sat perfectly still, staring at the small stack of papers in front of me. My will, my trust, my life, reduced to documents and signatures, and yet for the first time I felt the weight lifting. The truth was louder than either of them. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. Your Honour, I said, I never thought I'd see my daughter in a place like this, but I also never thought she'd look at me and see a bank account instead of a mother. Melissa looked up, tears sliding down her cheeks. I raised her to be smart, not cruel. I wanted her to be independent, not entitled. And when I started noticing things, missing checks, forged forms, I told myself she was just overwhelmed. I wanted to believe the best of her. I paused, steadying my voice. But believing in someone who's hurting you isn't love, it's denial. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling vent. The judge nodded for me to continue. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here because people like Harper and Dr. Cho reminded me that silence protects the wrong side. I'm here because this happens to more mothers than anyone wants to admit. The prosecutor thanked me and asked the court to enter my statement into the record. Melissa wept openly now. Daniel just stared straight ahead, jaw tight. When it was her turn again, Melissa's defense attorney urged her to show remorse. She tried. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said between sobs. I thought if I managed things, it would be easier. For everyone. The judge didn't raise his voice, but his words landed hard. Mrs. Reed, what you did was not management. It was manipulation. You treated your mother's autonomy as negotiable, and that is a line this court will not allow to blur. He turned to Daniel. And you enabled it for financial gain. I've seen many like you. You hide your greed behind words like responsibility and planning. It doesn't fool me. He looked at both of them. You are each sentenced to 1 year of community service, financial restitution, and a suspended 6-month jail term, contingent upon completion of counselling for elder abuse awareness. Any further contact with Mrs. Way Porter must be supervised by APS. Melissa's cry cracked through the air like glass breaking. Daniel just lowered his head, defeated. I didn't smile. I didn't even feel victorious, just tired, as the bailiff escorted them out and Melissa turned her head toward me. Her voice was barely audible. Mom, I'm sorry. I wanted to believe her, but apologies mean little when they arrive too late. Harper placed a steady hand on my arm. You did it, she whispered. I shook my head. No, we did. You saved me before anyone else would have noticed. She gave a faint smile. You'd have saved yourself eventually. You just needed proof. When we walked out of the courtroom, the spring air hit like a clean slate, cool, bright, unfiltered. Cameras flashed from the sidewalk, local news reporters already sniffing out the story. Harper guided me past them without a word. As we reached her car, I looked back once more. Through the courthouse doors, I saw Melissa and Daniel being led in opposite directions, two people who'd once built their whole lives on control, now completely powerless. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity, everything falling exactly where it was meant to. Harper opened the passenger door for me. "Where to?" I looked at her and said, "Home. I think I remember what that feels like now." The car pulled away from the curb. The courthouse shrank behind us, just another building full of echoes. But the sound of truth, that never really leaves a place. The house didn't feel like mine when I walked back into it. The air had the stillness of a museum, everything untouched, but nothing alive. The faint scent of lemon cleaner still lingered from Melissa's last round of helpful organising. The shelves were bare now, stripped of photos and trinkets that once told the story of a family. I stood in the middle of the living room, listening to the silence press against my ears. For the first time in months, no one was telling me what to sign, what to take, or what to swallow. Freedom felt strange. It didn't come with fireworks or applause. It came with an echo. On the kitchen table lay a box labelled Mom's Keepsakes. Melissa must have packed it before things fell apart. I opened it slowly. Inside were old Polaroids, a recipe book, my wedding ring, and a folded piece of paper that caught my breath. It was a note written in Melissa's teenage handwriting. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be just like you, smart, brave, and kind." The edges were yellowed, but the ink hadn't faded. For a long time, I just stared at the words. Somewhere between that promise and today's courtroom, something in her had broken. I slid the note back into the box and sat down at the table. The evening light filtered through the blinds, slicing the room into warm and cool stripes. That's when I saw the silver lantern on the windowsill, the one George, my late husband, had bought at a flea market years ago. I hadn't lit it since his funeral. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. The metal was cold but familiar. I found an old box of matches in the drawer and struck one. The flame flickered weakly at first, then steadied. When I lit the lantern, the glass glowed soft gold and the shadows in the room shifted. I whispered into the stillness, "You'd have handled this better, George." The light didn't answer, but somehow it helped. A knock at the door startled me. I hesitated before opening it, but when I did, Harper was standing there, smiling gently. She held a paper bag from the corner bakery. "You probably haven't eaten," she said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. "Old habit," I said, half smiling. "You nurses think everyone's starving." "Everyone is starving," she said, setting down the bag, some for food, some for peace. We sat together at the table, sharing warm bread and quiet. She looked around the room and said, "I used to think justice would feel loud. Turns out it just feels quiet." I nodded. Loud things fade, quiet things last. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "APS finished the paperwork. The house and your accounts are officially secured under your name. No more guardianship attempts, no pending claims. It's over." I took the papers, scanning the neat black print. Owner, Caroline Porter. My name, my house, my life back where it belonged. "Thank you," I said softly, "for everything." "You don't owe me thanks," she said. "You owe yourself time." We talked a little longer, about the court, about her next cases, about how she'd once nearly quit nursing after seeing too many people like me who never got a chance to fight back. "You were different," she said. "You didn't just want to survive, you wanted to reclaim your voice." "I didn't realise I'd lost it," I said. She smiled. "That's how it happens, quietly." When she left, the lantern flame was still burning on the windowsill. I turned off the other lights and watched the glow dance across the walls. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was calm. Later, I walked into the spare bedroom. It was stripped bare. Just a mattress, a dresser, and a stack of boxes Melissa had labelled for donation. I knelt beside one and opened it. Inside were winter coats, some of mine, some that belonged to women I used to volunteer with at the community centre. I smiled faintly. Maybe some good could come out of what was left behind. As I stood up, I noticed another small box pushed to the back of the closet. Inside it was a framed picture of Melissa at her college graduation. Her face was bright, proud, unbroken by bitterness. I ran a thumb over the glass, and the ache that had been sitting in my chest softened a little. No one wakes up one day and decides to become cruel. It happens one compromise at a time, one unchecked lie, one easy justification. I set the photo on the nightstand beside the bed. "We'll get there," I murmured. "Maybe not soon, but someday." The night deepened outside. The house creaked the way old houses do, like it was remembering. I walked back to the living room and sat near the lantern. Its soft light touched the folded note on the table again. When my husband was alive, he used to say, "You can't rebuild trust on words. You rebuild it on time." I finally understood what he meant. I stood and opened the front window, letting the cool Oregon air drift in. Somewhere down the street a dog barked and someone laughed. The world kept moving, even when mine had paused for months. As I closed the window, the faint reflection in the glass showed me sitting beside that silver lantern. An old woman who'd been lied to, manipulated, nearly erased. And yet somehow she'd stayed whole. I whispered, not to anyone in particular, "I'm still here." The lantern flickered once, as if it heard me. And I sat there a little longer, not as a victim or a survivor, but as a woman learning how to fill her house again, with peace instead of silence, and with light that didn't ask permission to stay. The morning came quiet and gold, the kind that creeps gently through curtains instead of shouting through them. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, the same one I'd sipped every morning for years, but today the cup felt lighter in my hand. It wasn't guilt that filled me anymore. It was something that felt suspiciously like purpose. Harper had been right. I needed time. But time without direction can turn into another kind of prison. So I gave it one. The idea came while I was watching the local news. They ran a short story about an elderly woman in Portland who'd lost her home to a fraudulent care agreement. Her daughter had cleaned out her accounts and left her in a motel. The reporter ended the segment with the words, "Authorities are investigating." That was the line that did it. I turned off the TV and whispered, "Authorities don't save people fast enough. People do." The next week I called Harper. "You ever think about starting something that lasts?" She laughed. "You mean like a business?" "No," I said, "like a promise." That's how the Harbour Light Fund was born, not from ambition, but from a quiet need to turn survival into service. We started small, using the settlement money from the case. I donated part of my savings, Harper contributed her time, and Dr. Babe Cho offered to join as medical advisor. We rented an old office above a hardware store's downtown. The paint peeled, the carpet smelled faintly like dust and history, but the windows faced the river, and when the sun hit them, the place lit up like hope itself. Our mission was simple: provide legal and emotional support for elderly women facing financial or guardianship abuse. We didn't promise miracles, just safety, information, and someone to believe them. The first call came 2 days after we put up the website. A trembling voice said, "My son says I'm too old to handle my money. He's transferring my account to his name tomorrow. Can you help me?" Harper took the call, calm and steady. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "You're not alone." By the end of the month, we had 15 cases, women from all over Oregon, some crying, some angry, all afraid. I listened to their stories like I was listening to different versions of my own life. Each one carried the same bruise, just in a different colour. One woman, Mrs. Lindstrom, brought a folder full of fake signatures her nephew had used to access her trust. Another, Evelyn Moore, came with nothing but a post-it note that said, "They said I was crazy. Am I?" When Harper introduced me to her, I told her softly, "You're not crazy, Evelyn. You're just finally noticing the lies." She cried for a full minute before she could speak again. We started organising workshops in the community centre. Protect your power of attorney. Spot the warning signs. Trust but verify. Local lawyers volunteered, and even Detective Kent showed up for a session, smiling as he said, "Mrs. Porter, you've caused quite a ripple effect." I smiled back. Good, maybe it'll reach the right shores. By summer, the Harbour Light Fund had its first grant. It wasn't much, just enough to cover rent for 6 months and print brochures. But it felt like validation. Harper hung the cheque on the wall next to a framed quote she wrote herself. "Kindness is action with backbone." That became our unofficial motto. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching Harper as she worked. The way she listened, really listened, to the women who came in. The way she never looked at them with pity, only respect. One afternoon, as we packed files, I told her, "You're doing God's work here." She shook her head. "No, Caroline, you are." "I just followed the light you lit." It took me a second to answer. "Funny," I said. "For years I thought I'd lost that light." "You didn't lose it," she said. "You just stopped looking in the mirror." That night I went home and found the silver lantern still sitting on the windowsill. I lit it again, just as I had that first night after the trial. The flame flickered, steady and alive. The next morning, the local newspaper called. They wanted to interview me about the fund. "You're quite the story," the reporter said. "A mother turning tragedy into a movement." I hesitated before answering. "It's not a movement," I said. "It's a mirror. We just help people see what they're worth before someone convinces them otherwise." The article came out a week later. Headline bold: "Elder abuse survivor starts Harbour Light Fund to protect others." The story spread quickly. Churches called, volunteers offered time, and a retired judge offered free legal consultations. Within 3 months, our dusty office had become a hive of quiet revolution. Women came with stories and left with plans. We didn't fix everything, but we gave them something Melissa had tried to take from me: power over their own lives. One Friday evening, as the sun dipped low and the office lights dimmed, Harper walked over with 2 mugs of coffee. "We made it through another week," she said. "Barely," I laughed. She handed me a file. "You should see this. Evelyn just got her account reinstated. The court ruled in her favour." I read the letter and smiled. "You know what that means, right?" Harper tilted her head. "What?" "It means the system can work when people care enough to make it." We clinked our mugs together, coffee sloshing a little over the rim. As I looked around the small office, filled with files, phones and faint light, I realised something profound. I wasn't rebuilding what Melissa broke. I was building something entirely new, something that couldn't be taken away with a signature. The Harbour Light Fund wasn't just a name. It was a promise that no one would have to whisper hide ever again. The first autumn rain came early that year, washing the dust off the town and bringing the smell of wet cedar through my open window. I was sitting at my desk sorting through donations for the Harbour Light Fund when I saw the envelope. It sat among the usual mail, bills, newsletters, the occasional thank you card, but this one stopped me cold. The handwriting was unmistakable, careful, slanted, familiar. The return address read Correctional Rehabilitation Centre, Lane County. For a moment I just stared at it. The room went still except for the sound of the rain against the window. I thought about throwing it away, I really did. But curiosity, or maybe love in its oldest, most stubborn form, made my hands open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to say it anyway. I've spent months trying to understand what I did. Not just the things that got me here, but the things that made me that person. The one who looked at you and saw numbers instead of memories. You were never weak, Mom. You were patient. And I mistook your patience for something I could use. I see that now. Every day I wake up here, I remember you standing in that courtroom, calm, clear, and stronger than I ever deserved. I'm sorry for every drop I gave you, every lie I told, every time I called my selfishness love. If you never write back, I'll understand. But I hope you know I'm trying to be better. Not to earn forgiveness, but to become someone you wouldn't have to hide from. Melissa." My eyes blurred halfway through, but I kept reading until the end. I could feel her words trembling on the page, unsure of their right to exist. I folded the letter again and set it beside the lantern on my desk. The flame inside it flickered once as if it recognized her name. That night, I didn't sleep much. I made tea, walked the creaking floorboards, and kept catching myself glancing at that folded paper. Forgiveness is a tricky thing. It asks you to open a door that's been nailed shut, not because you want the person to come in, but because you're tired of guarding it. By morning, I knew what I wanted to do. At the office, Harper noticed the letter on my desk. "You heard from her," she said quietly. I nodded. "She's thinking. That's something." "Are you going to write back?" I looked out the window, watching the drizzle streak the glass. "I don't know yet. I don't think she needs my words right now. She needs time to hear her own." Harper leaned on the doorway, thoughtful. "You know, most people never get an apology like that. It takes humility to write it." "Humility doesn't erase harm," I said softly. But maybe it's where healing begins. She smiled faintly. You sound like you should run a counselling program. I already run one, I said. It just looks different. The day carried on as usual, calls, meetings, new clients. But every time I saw the letter, my chest tightened and eased at once. That afternoon, a new volunteer came in, a young woman named Chloe who was studying social work. She told me her grandmother had been manipulated into signing over her house to a caregiver. She never got it back, Chloe said, but your fund helped my mom find the courage to go after the man who did it. I smiled. That's why we're here. She hesitated before continuing. It's strange, though. My grandma used to say she forgave him in the end. I never understood how. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook, I said. It's about putting down the rope before it burns through your hands. Chloe nodded slowly. I like that. When she left, I returned to my desk. The office had gone quiet, the kind of quiet I'd once feared, but now welcomed. I picked up Melissa's letter again and read it one more time. Her handwriting wavered in places, like she'd been crying as she wrote. For the first time, I didn't see the woman who betrayed me. I saw the child who once drew me cards on Mother's Day, who believed kindness could fix anything. Maybe deep down she still did. I pulled a clean sheet of stationery from the drawer. My pen hovered over it for a long moment. Then slowly I began to write. Melissa, I got your letter. I'm glad you're thinking about what happened. Really thinking. Really thinking. I don't need promises from you. I just need you to live differently. That's the only apology that matters now. I don't hate you. I don't think I ever did. I was angry, yes, and hurt more deeply than I can say. But hate is just another way of staying tied to the past, and I've untied enough knots for one lifetime. Take care of yourself. Learn something true every day. That's how you start over. Mom, I didn't send it. Not yet. I folded it carefully and placed it in the same envelope as her letter. Some words belong to the silence before they're ready to move. Later that evening, I lit the lantern again. Its soft light filled the room with warmth. I looked at both letters side by side and felt something shift. Not a dramatic forgiveness, not absolution, but peace. The kind that hums low and steady, the kind that doesn't need an audience. When Harper called to check in before leaving work, she asked, "How are you feeling tonight?" Lighter, I said. That's a good word. I smiled. It's an honest one. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the streets wet and glimmering under the lamplight. I closed my eyes, listening to the faint sound of the river beyond town. It reminded me that life keeps moving, not rushing, not forgetting, just flowing quietly forward. On my desk, the two letters sat beneath the lantern's glow, one written out of guilt, the other out of grace, and together they looked a little like closure, wearing the face of love. The following spring arrived softly, like it was trying not to disturb anyone. The pear trees on my street bloomed early, their white petals drifting through the air like snow that didn't know it was supposed to melt. I'd begun walking every morning again, the same route I used to take before everything happened. The neighbours waved, some with pity, most with kindness. They didn't know what to say, and that was fine. Silence, I'd learned, could be its own kind of respect. One morning, as I reached the corner where the post office stood, the clerk called out to me, "Mrs. Porter, you've got something here." He handed me a small package wrapped neatly in brown paper. No return address, just a short note on the top, for the woman who reminded me what light looks like. Inside was a candle, hand-poured, lavender and sage, and a card that said, "From Evelyn. You saved more than my bank account. You saved my dignity." I smiled quietly to myself. The Harbour Light Fund had started as an idea, born out of pain, but it had turned into something that kept giving back in ways I never expected. Harper had been right again. Quiet work could echo louder than shouting ever could. When I got back home, I placed the candle next to the silver lantern on the windowsill. The two lights, one from the past, one from the present, sat side by side like they understood each other. A few weeks later, Harper stopped by the office with coffee and news. "The Oregon Council on Aging wants to recognise the Harbour Light Fund," she said, grinning. "They're giving us the Community Impact Award." I blinked, then laughed. "You mean the little team above the hardware store?" "Exactly," she said. "The little team that started a wave." At the ceremony, they gave me a simple plaque and a short speech to read. I kept it brief. I told them justice doesn't always need a gavel or a courtroom. Sometimes it needs a cup of tea, a witness, and a person who refuses to be quiet anymore. Afterward, Harper and Dr. Cho took me to dinner. The restaurant was small, with low lights and a view of the river. The air smelled like rosemary and rain. Dr. Cho raised his glass and said, "To second chances and to women who prove that survival isn't luck, it's choice." I smiled. To good people who remind us what courage sounds like. When I got home that night, the house felt warmer than it had in a long time. Not because of company, but because peace doesn't need applause. It just needs space. On the coffee table, the letters from Melissa still rested beneath the lantern. I hadn't moved them. Some nights I'd read them again, not to reopen old wounds, but to remind myself how far I'd come from them. That night, I finally took my own letter out of the envelope, the one I'd written but never sent. I read it once more, folded it neatly, and placed it in a new envelope addressed to her name. The next morning I mailed it. No dramatic pause, no hesitation, just a quiet act of letting go. 3 weeks later, a postcard arrived. A picture of a coastal sunset, orange sky, cliffs, and the sea. The handwriting on the back was small but steady. "Mom, I got your letter. Thank you for writing. I'm working in the library here now. It's not much, but it feels honest. I think I understand what you meant about learning something true every day. I light a candle at night, not to forget, but to remember the right way. Love, Melissa." I didn't cry. Not the kind of tears that fall, anyway. Just the kind that gather quietly behind your eyes when the world gives you something you thought it never would again. Peace that doesn't need an audience. That evening, I walked to the porch with my tea and sat watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. The silver lantern burned beside me, and I lit Evelyn's candle too, its flame soft and steady. The world outside hummed with the ordinary sounds of life. Kids riding bikes, someone mowing a lawn, the wind brushing through the trees. Nothing remarkable, yet everything was. I thought about all the women who had walked through the doors of the Harbour Light Fund, afraid, uncertain, but still showing up. Each one of them carried the same story in different shapes. Betrayal dressed as care, control disguised as concern. And each one learned, eventually, that reclaiming your life doesn't have to mean shouting. Sometimes it's just whispering, "I'm still here." As the sky darkened, I wrote the final entry in the journal I'd started the day I got home from the hospital. The same journal that had held every thought, every fear, every victory since. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a nurse's uniform or the steady patience of a friend who refuses to give up. And sometimes it looks like an old woman sitting on her porch holding a cup of tea, no longer waiting for an apology that might never come. I've learned that revenge isn't always about payback. It's about peace, the kind that comes when you stop begging for love from the people who don't know how to give it. Silence isn't weakness, it's timing, and when truth comes quietly, it never leaves. I closed the journal, set it beside the lantern, and leaned back. The night had that stillness I'd grown to love, not empty, just honest. Somewhere, miles away, my daughter might have been lighting her candle at the same time. Maybe she'd finally found her own kind of quiet. The flame in my lantern danced once, as if answering, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the past was following me. It was simply sitting beside me, no longer sharp, no longer heavy, just a shadow that finally learned how to rest. The stars came out slow, one by one. I stayed there until the tea went cold, the lantern flickered low, and the peace I'd built filled every corner of my house like light finding its way home. The night air was cool and the sound of the river drifted faintly through the open window. I sat there a while longer, watching the silver lantern's last flame fade into a soft glow. It wasn't just a light anymore. It was proof that peace can outlast pain. That's the real ending to every storm. Not noise, not victory, but stillness. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's that revenge doesn't always come with raised voices or broken things. Sometimes it comes in the quiet, in a woman rebuilding her life, in a daughter learning remorse, in the calm after truth finally speaks. Because family revenge stories aren't about destruction, they're about restoration, about taking back what was stolen, not with hate, but with dignity. In the end, every act of justice, every moment of self-respect becomes its own kind of light. The kind that doesn't flicker out when people stop watching. The kind that guides others home. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. These family revenge stories remind us that even in betrayal, there's always a chance for wisdom. That in family drama, what matters most isn't how loud the pain was, it's how quietly strength returns. So if you believe stories like this should keep being told, real, human, and filled with quiet justice, don't forget to subscribe. There are more revenge stories waiting, each one reminding us, kindness isn't weakness, and truth always finds its way home.